Response video to Fred. The best universe, kind of a thought experiment kind of video, just extemporaneous, whatever, blah blah blah, on your mind kind of crap. But it brings up a ton of, a plethora of subjects are built into these kinds of questions because they, in my opinion, make it so obvious and easy to see all the flaws in human logic, all the broken that exists and how we even perceive our existence. So yeah, let's play your video because it's full of this jargon that I say has got to go. We can't have an intelligent conversation until we fix the language. All the smart people are going to have to agree that certain words are crap and they need to be fixed in terms of how we describe things because they're just not good enough. Not even close to good enough. It's like a surgeon, you know, having only 5 words to describe all the instruments he uses. You know, just doesn't work. It's too crude, too stupid, too simplistic. Too stupid. Come on, video. Be nice if it played. Damn YouTube.
I think one of the presuppositions, one of the assumptions or axioms that people come into this discussion about natalism, antinatalism, value of life, that kind of stuff, one of the presuppositions that people come into it with is the presupposition that a universe with life in it is inherently better than a universe without life in it. I mean, it's so obvious.
Okay.
It's so...
Yeah, so I really hate that I can't pause videos very well when they're in bed, so I don't know why that is, but anyway, they don't work. Anyway, alright, so the first problem we have is right now the word life. What does that mean? Do you mean the first 3.5 billion years when life didn't feel or think? When it was just mechanical bits of chemistry, reproducing, replication for the sake of replication, accomplishing nothing except, furthering a design model into the future. All right. Now, if we're not going to acknowledge that life is being used to describe 2 different things, I mean they are different. There's just as much of a difference between a replicating DNA molecule and peanut butter as there is difference between a non-sentient biologically living thing and a sentient living thing. I mean, there's more. A sentient living thing is preposterously more significant in terms of its existence than the non-sentient. My toaster it's as big a difference between me and my toaster as there is between me and a paramecium, or me and some other non-neurologically bestowed or benefited organism, living thing. We're both thrown in the same category, but they couldn't be fundamentally more different in a sense. There's the distinction in terms of the difference between me and a tree is just so frickin' preposterous that there's no excuse for having any words in common almost to describe these 2 things. They both contain seawater. I mean, come on. That's how we're going to qualify these things? That's how we're going to point and look at them and say they're both seawater possessors? I mean, it's just silly. Fucking silly.
Part of our way of being. I think it's difficult to even imagine, to even think about that without just thinking, well, it's obvious. Obviously, a universe with life and it's going to be better. But I think we have, if we're going to be honest,
I don't think it takes much thought. I really don't. I mean, all you have to do is sit there for a second and think about Aliens, right? The movie Aliens. You think about another world with frickin' goddamn beasties on it, fucking bug planet. All right, we got movies where they came up with the phrase, "It's a bug planet," right? It's covered with fucking bugs. Yeah, you could say, shit, no, I wouldn't want to be born there. Come on. So you can think of lots of possible living worlds that would not be a pleasant prospect to think about. And likewise, you can think about all the non-existent right now, the non-existent Martian and the non-existent Venusians and the Plutonians, and you can say, shit, I don't really miss them. I don't really see a function they would provide. I mean, they could give us all free candy, but beyond them serving our needs in some way, what possible reason would I say, yeah, we need more of that? I obviously don't have one, or I'd be advocating for spontaneous generation of life on those planets through spontaneous implementation, seeding of the planet. If I thought there was something missing in the universe because that didn't exist. So obviously I don't think something's missing. Obviously I don't think there's a missing magic. Obviously my whole perception of any value to this thing has to do with the fact that I'm one of it. And that's all it is. It's my nepotism to my existence, my attachment to my existence. That is the entire perception of any kind of function or value or utility or purpose or anything to this whole thing. If it doesn't have my ego, whatever your vaporous thing in the universe, this God cloud of consciousness thing, this higher order of Bua Bua, yeah, if it isn't thinking like me, then I don't see any reason to have it, okay? If it isn't cool, you know, fuck it. I don't see a purpose in it. I'm not missing it.
Truthful and I don't like to use the word objective, but it's going to be as objective as we can be. I do think we have to kind of park that presupposition, or at least hold it up to the light and allow ourselves to think into that.
You don't like using the word objective? I mean, this is something you got to get over. I mean, come on. I mean, it's a word describing perspective. I mean, not to accept that we have to try to be as clinical. Okay, can we use that word? Methodical, careful, logical, disciplined. I mean, we come up with lots of good words that have real good value to describe what being objective is. Okay, objective is not being biased, is not being perverse, is not being distortive, is not being all these negative things. And so it's a good friggin' word.
You know, is it, in what sense does it make sense to say the universe with life in it is superior to a universe without life in it? Unless we're just being chauvinistic.
Yeah. Well, again, if life stopped at Tyrannosaurus, I'm just saying that I don't think people are going to answer the question the same way. So if you said life never evolves to achieve high intelligence, only one organism has done it in the whole history of the 4 billion years of existing replications, and only that one acquired it in some weird way where it required a huge potential. We acquired our intellectual potential before we could fill it. Before we could go to school, we gained the ability to go to school, which is a weird thing to do. And so, yeah, it hasn't happened in any other permutations of this matter on this planet. Even though organisms have existed for hundreds of millions of years like dragonflies, why don't they acquire all these navigation skills, all this other neurology that enables them to do all kinds of things? Why don't they acquire more intelligence? Well, I guess because they don't need more intelligence, and the second variable would be is the only way to do the high intelligence thing is to create the language thing so they could be flying around with a bunch of books and explaining to each other, this is what Aristotle said, blah, 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 blah. And do that kind of shit to each other. But yeah, that would be totally unproductive to their mission statement. And so it's only through a freak of nature, an uncommon event, another one of the uncommon, improbable events that we ever acquired our high intelligence. Because we had to acquire the capacity to do high intelligence before we had anything to put in the bucket. I mean, like I said, nature does not usually give you a bucket when you don't have anything to put in it. It doesn't give you a tooth when there's nothing to stick your tooth in.
About our particular contribution to the universe, which I think is part of it, and I'm not denying the subjective value of that, but I think using it as an axiom is different, isn't it? One of the ways I've been trying to think into that is by imagining kind of alternate worlds. Because I'm imagining, if I was to imagine an alternate world, just a different planet, let's say there's a different planet somewhere else, and something like life has occurred on that planet. Now I know Dawkins is on record somewhere.
Okay, he's going to describe something that just isn't anything like life, though. So that's the problem here. You're going to describe an end product without describing the mechanism that's inevitably necessary to create the end product, which is need, which is something has to have the value. It has to start with the value. That's why we have intelligence, is because there was a value in our survival. We don't have the intelligence because intelligence was just a nice thing to have. So the utility has to be first, and that requires it to be an evolutionary process. So I think Dawkins is perfectly within reasonable bounds to say if there's any life in the universe or any complexity, the only way the complexity can arise in the universe is through some natural selection evolution process. Evolution is, in fact, you describe it as a higher function of the universe. I mean, I don't like that terminology, but it creates a different plateau, a different arena where new physics is involved, where now there is such a thing as natural selection. There can't be natural selection when there's nothing to select, and replication provides the opportunity for selection. So you have to have the replicating molecule. You have to have it. It's a necessary part of evolution. It's a necessary part of acquiring double complexity, if that's what you want to call it. It's something's not going to require it through some other physical mechanism that's within any reasonable contemplation. I mean, I think you could sit forever and try to imagine how something could acquire super complexity out of basic chemistry, and I just don't think you can do it because super chemistry doesn't provide any mechanism. There's only this 100 elements. They can only combine in certain ways. There's no way to make them super complex in any kind of ordered structure without applying natural selection to create the order, to create the mechanical precision. You have to have natural selection to have mechanical precision.
So I was saying that if life and complexity, even doesn't even use the word life, I think, but if complexity was to arise anywhere in the universe, the only way it could happen was through natural selection.
Oh.
But let's just hold on that for the moment, and let's just imagine that complexity does arise on a different planet somewhere else. I don't know exactly how, some kind of molecule, but it's not it doesn't do what DNA did and doesn't turn into cells, and cells don't form multicellular organisms, and those multicellular organisms don't get into that kind of competing thing. So there's no race, there's no selection pressure, none of that.
Right. So none of the things intrinsically fundamental to the elements of design are present. So again, it's an impossible place to go to realistically. So let's just say, okay, for the sake of, we'll just imagine the poofing, the creation of a complexity that has no imposing order, that there's nothing imposing its structure, where natural selection imposes through this whole thing of, reproduce for the sake of reproduce in the first place. That's your mission statement, that's your prime directive. And then you have imposed on top of that a notion of survival of the, let's not use the word fittest because it's not really a relevant term. It has nothing to do with any kind of higher thought of that word, what fitness means in terms of efficiency. It just has to do with this durability word. So yeah, survival of the most durable based on environmental circumstances. And that's it. And so that's the mission statement that created us. And obviously we're fundamentally broken because of that broken mission statement. And so you're saying that something else, there would be an order to its creation. It would gain complexity. Something like what we have, some sort of consciousness, intelligence thing that wasn't in some way ordered by a circumstance that said what defines utility. And if you don't have something defining that utility, I'm just saying there won't be anything, okay? There's no such, the consciousness isn't going to have an ego then. You have to build its ego. The only thing that makes anything valuable to us is this ego crap. I mean, this is the core, this is the root of all evil, is the fact that we are this wanting, needing, perceptually attached, addictive organism. Without those elements, you don't have anything.
And the kind of stuff is in place. It's complexity arising from through different origins. And it's complexity which doesn't produce all of the after effects and the side effects.
Right. So this is another point I've made repeatedly in videos, but there is no place for intelligence to go. Intelligence is a janitor. That's all it is. Intelligence fixes problems. So you have to create a problem for intelligence to have something to do. All right? So the only way this extra intelligence that you're creating in the universe, this extra contemplating force, whatever the fuck it is, this ambiguous blob of complexity contemplating something, presumably, processing something somehow, some reason why there's chain reactions of neurology going on inside of it somehow, some sort of patterns of processing. Well, what is it processing? Like I said, the only intelligence stops having relevance as soon as there are no problems. So if you don't have a sentient at risk, the intelligence will have nothing to do unless you give it something to do, unless you impose on it a prime directive, like tell the toaster you're a toaster, you will toast toast. It will give up. It'll just say, fuck, I got nothing to do here. It'll just shut off. It won't do for no reason. It has to be compelled to do. Do is a compulsion mechanism. There's no do without the compelling mechanism.
There's no competition for resources, there's no mate selection, there's none of that kind of, there's no attrition, none of that kind of stuff happens. It just escalates, complexity just escalates. And it escalates in ways which are absolutely fantastic. You know, I mean, maybe not surpassing our own, let's keep it relatively modest, but the complexity at least matches the complexity of the human mind. It gets at least that complex.
Oh, this is such a glorification, this complexity for the sake of complexity now. We have reproduction for the sake of reproduction, and now it's complexity for the sake of complexity. Most of our complexity is involved in doing silly, shitty, stupid, idiotic, inane things. Most of our brain is basically functioning to process bullshit information about our body and, tweaking and pulling and yanking on us in different ways to make us do something. And so we have a few of these little conceptions, ideas that pop into our head, associations between words and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, okay, it's complex, but I mean, what is the complexity built on? It's still built on the directives of the organism. The lizard's doing most of the motivating. So this is, it's this glorification that we're doing something, like there's something, that would be fantastic. I just don't get the fantastic part. I don't get the magnificent part. Complexity for the sake of complexity. We could stack a zillion cards on top of a card, so we could make a tower of cards, and it would be incredibly, fantastically complex. And yeah, you'd say for one fucking, 5 minutes, and then you'd say, well, where's the pinball machines? Where are the women at? You'd want something else to do besides contemplate the complexity of the giant tower of cards. I mean, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't do anything.
And perhaps even a very simple and rudimentary human mind, but it gets complex enough for that. Complex enough to have awareness, and complex enough to have consciousness. Maybe your language, maybe descriptive powers.
Again, these are all words. You just fucking. What's the point there? What's awareness? What are these things if you're not going to talk about feelings? And as soon as you introduce feelings, feelings are intrinsically value laden. That's all they are. They're covered in value definitions. So now you're saying it's a value organism. It has some capacity to value something. There's a positive state and a negative state, a better state, a worse state, a less good state. So there's always these relative comparisons, and it would obviously now have the mission statement to create the better state than the lesser state. So now it's an ego-driven, self-driven entity, because it has a state of contemplation that is better than in some other state of contemplation. And as soon as you do that, as soon as it's corrupted by that personal interest, it's a fucked game.
Those things that we value in the human mind, and perhaps other things that we don't quite recognise because we don't have access to that particular form of development. And it's a kind of global consciousness. It's almost like a panpsychist consciousness just arises somewhere on this planet.
Wow, you don't like the word no, I can't think of it. Not independent, but objective. But you'll go for pan this psychic and pan blah blah and all that kind of jargon is okay to throw out there like it's supposed to mean something to somebody. Universal consciousness, like the bigger brain is better. I'll make a brain as big as a solar. I'll make a brain as big as a galaxy. What's it going to be thinking about? How big its wiener is? I mean, come on. This is the thinking process is been filtered. Our entire thinking machine is the product of a filtering process, a gleaning of relevant associations, of connections between green and plant, and just common definitions, just general descriptions. And that's all it is. And a huge percentage of those have been perverted. They've been perverted, twisted, bent because of a self-interest. And so then it basically has taken the clarity of a world, and because of that, it's distorted it and perverted the image and bent it and made it crooked to satisfy the machine, to make it a game the machine can play, to make the wheel it's running in seem interesting. The animal has a delusion in its head. Okay, it's not seeing itself running a wheel with little spokes. It's seeing an adventure. It's seeing somewhere it's going. It's getting somewhere. It's accomplishing something. And that's the delusion created by our perversion of the logical filter. We've been given the ability to associate things, to understand things. And if we did this honestly, if we objectively looked at the world, our life, our origins most specifically, we would see what we are. Okay, it's a 4 billion year old idiotic gladiator war for nothing, for no accomplishment, so one asshole can hold up his sword and say, I fucking win, on top of all the bloody corpses. And then you just do it all over again. The bell rings, another round, just so somebody can hold up their sword, say, I win, have a little ego moment, the end, do it over again. That's the reality. That's the reality we have distorted and perverted into a fucking magical, universal consciousness, Pan-Gaia theory, blah, 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 blah. Bullshit. And now you're giving those same fantasy elements to this universal consciousness that's going to sit there and say, you know, how fantastic. I'm being conscious of the universe. Da, 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 da. I'm imagining a duck fucking a dead goose. For no good reason, because I don't have a whole bunch of psychological crap. I mean, this doesn't make any sense.
Nobody gets hurt. There's just the purest form of mind that we know. And
yeah, sorry. Nobody gets hurt. Purest form of mind. Again, what does that mean? Purest form of mind. Without the value core, without the value gravity, the whole planetary system falls apart. Okay, the sun is the ego. If you're going to analogize it to the solar system, use that as a metaphor. The gravity is the value. If you don't have an appreciation, if you can't tell this from that, if this doesn't cause you less comfort than that, there will be no thinking, there'll be no processing, there'll be no imagination, there'll be no nothing.
But none of the downsides. Let's just imagine that. Now, could we look at that planet and this planet side by side, and again, putting our own carbon chauvinism to one side for a moment, could we say, well, which is the best out of these two? Out of these two experiments in the development of complexity, this one called biological life and this one called something else, which has been the most successful experiment in devising developing complexity?
Well, this is such an open question. Are you going to count the 3.5 billion years, okay, of non-sentient? So you only have 500 million years of our history, though, right? Of these, but this is 500 million years of sentient organisms ripping each other to pieces. So human beings can go, how fantastic! So they can say these words like something marvelous is. They can invent a word like marvelous. It's all fucking marvelous. Okay, it's bullshit. It's complete crap, but they're going to call it marvelous. And so you have 500 million years of little machines going ouch okay, and not much else. Just being capable of saying, ow, 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 ow. And not doing any marvelousing, not doing any fantastic, not doing any of that crap. Just going fucking ouch a lot. 500 million years of that. I'm going to compare that to anything but a big giant bucket of puke. What the fuck could I possibly compare that to and say it doesn't completely fail? That no matter what, I mean, there's nothing here. You're just going to keep talking like we're doing something fantastic because we had a notion in our fucking head. I mean, it's just idiotic. What am I comparing? You know, a twitchy anus on the human twitchy anus versus the universal consciousness is what? What? It doesn't even have a twitchy anus? It doesn't get any pleasure or pain? How the fuck could it mean anything? How could it be a relevant comparison? And again, then we'll get into the whole fucking argument that why do we even have the capacity to feel good? It's only because we've been thrown in the dungeon. The only reason why the light has any kind of capacity to give us any kind of comfort is because we've been thrown into discomfort. I mean, what comes first, the confusion or the clarity? The confusion.
I think there's two ways we can answer that. One is we could say, well, that one's best because, according to all of the moral scruples of humanity to do with the minimization of suffering, maximization of pleasure, the gaining of more knowledge, all of those kind of things, this other planet is clearly doing it better. There's no attrition rate, doesn't seem to be any downsides. So we'd have to say...
Yeah, well, again, it's not even a contemplatable contemplation. I can't even come up with what this thing is, this universal consciousness thing you're talking about. It's like some kind of Star Trek glowy, sparkly light thing. I don't miss a single civilization in Star Trek. I mean, I miss some of the hot chicks, but beyond the hot chicks, I don't miss that they don't really exist. A lot of them seem incredibly anal and fucked up anyway. I don't miss any of it. None of it. Not one little bit of it do I find, oh damn, why doesn't that really exist? Floating city and the blah 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 and the blah blah. Who the fuck cares? I don't fucking care. I can't see any reason to give a fuck. I mean, what are you talking about here? How the fuck could I sit there and make a comparison and say somehow this is meaningful? It's not meaningful. It's nothing.
That the other planet is doing it better. As soon as we say that, of course, we're saying comparisons are possible. It is possible to look at the universe with life in it and the universe without life in it, because we can apply criteria to the value of a particular version of life in the universe.
Well, again, it just depends on how you judge your comparison, how you're making your judgment. If you actually think life is producing something that the Venetians aren't producing, the non-existent Venetians, that there's some kind of value lost because of all the things that don't exist and that aren't contemplating their own twitchy ass, and that somehow there's a huge loss in the universe because of it, unless you have some irrational perception like that. And why the fuck would this be of all of any kind of, even, like I said, how can I even possibly contemplate what this non-relevant thing is doing in a non-relevant universe where nothing matters? I mean, how do I make any sense out of a universe where there's nothing in jeopardy, nothing's going to feel a negative thought or feeling? How the fuck can I actually have how can I place any value on that? How could I possibly make a value comparison when there's no value constituents, when there's no frickin' candy being negotiated, there's no currency here? How the hell could I care about the transaction if there's no fucking currency?
So it becomes possible. If, on the other hand, we say, well, there's no way of judging, these things are just different, these things are just differently complex, if we're being objective. Yes, this one's got attrition rates and this one hasn't, but let's just lift things out of the picture. As soon as you do that, then the argument stalls out, because that...
Yeah, well, again, so it just depends on what you're comparing. It's easy to make a comparison between things that are similar. So obviously, if we just compare life on Earth and we say there's life on another planet somewhere and it's exactly the same except 12 million Jews die in the Holocaust instead of 6 million, then you can make an obvious comparison and say, okay, let's take that one because there's less harm. All right, everything else is exactly the same. The only difference is this 6 million suffering people. So yeah, this one wins because it has 6 million less suffering people. Easy not complicated comparison. So comparison is easy, but you have to have currency to make comparisons. You have to have value constituents, and there's no value constituent common between this imagined universal consciousness thing you're creating and the existence of life on Earth, which is littered with the consequence of life on Earth. So again, if you talk about life on Earth and say we're going to stop at 500 million years ago before anything said ouch, well, isn't that a different story of complexity than the complexity where ouch exists? Isn't it? And then you're going to go with human ouch is, everybody thinks the human ouch is somehow fucking 5 million times more focused or something. It's special super ouch because they've associated a word like fantastic or marvelous with their ouch, and so somehow their ouch means more because they have vocabulary to define their ouch, which is, in my opinion, just absolute rubbish. So, I mean, the whole premise of human existence, the whole premise of the average human's perception of what the word life even means is fucking bullshit. They don't even understand that the mammals they're eating are goddamn sentients of equal, at least equal capacity to their own, and equal capacity to be anything called harmed. They're just as easily harmed, as we are.
Prevents you from saying that a universe with life in it is inherently better than a universe without. Oops, somebody at the door. Anyway, that's what I'm thinking about right now.
Well, look, the only reason why people want life in the universe is because they imagine it to be like themselves. So as soon as we make the life something less like themselves, they're going to be less interested. So if we have a proposal to send human life into the universe, right? We got one spaceship with light speed power that's, the aliens gave us. I don't know, whatever. Who cares? It only fits 2 people, and the human race decides to put a black man and a black woman in it. I wonder how many white people will say, yeah, let's do let's populate the universe. Right there, you're going to create a problem. Even though they're fundamentally, identical humans, the fact that their skin color is different is going to be enough of a fucking, game off. It's not enough like me. Because that's all people want to do, is populate the universe with them fucking selves. And that's all they're doing with their goddamn nathaling, is having this idiotic notion that somehow their fucking kid has something to do with them, when all it has to do with is a bunch of other genetics. Okay? I mean, the odds are, your genetics in going to the next generation is, you're like I said, you're splitting it with the whole sexual reproduction thing in the first place. So you're not even going to create anything close to a copy of yourself anyway. So the whole thing is just goddamn stupid. And the fact that people think their identity and their maturation has something that somehow is static, and their kid is going to somehow have the same notions and feelings and sensations and appreciations and values, is again just idiotic. So the whole thing is fucking idiotic. Why don't you just got to make a video just telling human beings they're stupid idiots, and this kind of engaging in this kind of mush, soft, fluffy, bullshit kind of thought experiment. No, have the real thought experiment. What if the universe didn't have you in it? Would you validate the universe anyway? Would you say, go ahead, run the universe, even though I'm not going to be in it? Please. No, thank you. So anyway, sorry. This is so far from what should qualify. And I'm not saying this is against you. I'm just saying this is what's wrong with the human race. This qualifies as what's called an intellectual deep conversation. And it's void of intellectual discipline, intelligent discipline. It's not disciplined by coherent language, explicit clinical verbiage. It's having a medical conversation by just saying something like, yeah, I'm going to do a zigzaggy thingy and poke a holey and, clip, snip, snip, pulley outies, tie, or some kind of bullshit like that. And that's a clinical description of the surgery. I mean, this is a juvenile exploration of our circumstance and the reality of the physical universe we exist in. This isn't even coming goddamn close, and this is what humans have qualified as having an intelligent, deep philosophical conversation. And it's not even close to being relevant, and as I stated, disciplined by any acceptance of basic structural truth regarding our existence. Those things that we could call objective, established, beyond reasonable contention, facts. We evolved here. It is a goddamn bug planet, and our goddamn intelligence is a byproduct, and we have used it as if you would use toilet paper. We have used it to make it more efficient to clean up our messes, and that's all it's all we've done with it, is to hide our own shame. We haven't done anything real with it that doesn't serve self-interest of this stupid human organ. Yeah. All right, enough said, I think.